Hello there, it's Paul here and welcome along everyone. This is going to be a small series on boxes. And so, why boxes? I've only been turning now 9-10 months and I seem to have a love of making boxes. I just think there's something special about them. And there's all sorts you can do, different shapes, styles, everything. And over the last year I've been watching lots and lots of YouTube videos and I've seen lots and lots of different types made and different things. So at the moment I can think of probably about 3 parts that I'm going to do for this series. This part 1, which is all about the proportions. Part 2 will probably be about grain orientation, and part 3 will be about things like inlays. And like I say, there may be more parts come afterwards. I haven't really thought about it too much. So part 1, proportions. A lot of the videos I watch always show the proportions of a box, that the lid should be roughly about 1/3 of the size of the box. Here's one example of one I've rough turned, and the bottom on there is fairly thick, so the bottom is down to about there. So by the time I probably take that down to there, take the lid down, I mean the lid is going to probably be about 1/3 of the size of the box. Now I'll show some pictures up here of some of the other boxes I've made over the time, and yes, a lot of them are on this 1/3 proportion for the lid, and on the odd occasion I've done some where you've got a little thin lid over the top. But today what I've done, which I will show the video after this we're making, I've made this one, and it's oak. It's got a few splits in it, which I don't mind. I think it looks very rustic, and that is the right way up, and you'll see the lid there, as you can see, is actually 2/3 the size of the box. Now I personally think in this case it works. Boxes are often made for a purpose, for storing something. So in this case it could be something that you've got something fairly well solid at the bottom that you want to grab from the bottom, but you need the storage space for it to store on the top there. So like I say, I think proportions, the 1/3 for the lid are really there as a guide. I've heard people quote things like rules for bowl shapes and boxes and stuff like that, and I don't believe there are any rules. I believe that they are guidelines. I believe that there's many things in this world that we see in thirds, purely and simply because it looks more pleasing to the eye. So yeah, typically that is, I mean I'll separate that a bit so you can see, I think that that is probably down to the thirds again. I mean I suppose the base really is probably about 1/4 of the overall box. So I think in general most boxes will come out with that lid being 1/3 of the height of the box, just purely and simply because it's something we naturally see as a pleasing item. But like I say, there are exceptions like this, and like I say, whether you class it as breaking the rules or not, and I'm sure there will be some of you out there who absolutely think this is horrible, but then I suspect there will be at least 1 or 2 people who absolutely love it. I mean, forget the wood, the finish and everything like that, but it's more really of the shape and the proportions, whether you find that pleasing. And I actually do, because I think it's come out quite nicely. So I'm going to show the video next of this being made. I'm sure there's many of you out there who are watching this now who are very experienced turners and have produced probably hundreds, if not thousands, of boxes, and maybe thinking this is a bit of a waste of time, this series, but I'm hoping that even with yourselves it will may prompt the question whether you really think about something like perspective or grain, or when I come up later on in the series on different things. You may already think about all that and at least want to leave comments and pass feedback back as to my questions and what I think of the thing. If you're new to turning, relatively new like myself, you may well find this of interest, because I think working with boxes is like a whole new world of doing things, because it's such a vast array of things you can do with them. So I have a piece of what I believe is oak here. It's going to be interesting actually. This light patch is a bit more punky, so that may well come out anyway. But, so I've just trued this up, put a 10 on each end ready for a box. And now this will be my base, and I will need to leave room to part off, so that we could say there is about where the base will be. And usually you're going to take a little bit away from the top, but not too much anyway. So when we talk about proportions on a box, it's often not the height, basically how much of the height is taken by the lid. Now this particular piece here, then we're down to about 95mm. So we live in a world based on thirds, so you could normally say that this lid would be probably about 30 or just over 30mm high, which would be about there, which looks all very pleasing. And I've seen lots of boxes based on this which are about a third. I've seen some where literally the whole thing is basically the box and you just have a little lid that sits in the top, and I've seen some which are about halfway. But what I'm going to do here, it really does push the rules the other way, is I'm actually going to make the lid over half the height. And the reason I'm only just going just over the half is because what I'm going to do, normally when you put the lip in the box, you're only talking 3-4mm, something like that. But because I'm going to take this base that much lower, I'm going to therefore have a bigger lip to hold the lid. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to take the base down to itself about 20mm and have the lip about 10. That then leaves 65. So if we just mark these up, now you could actually say that we're almost in the thirds again, but this time we've actually got the lid probably 2/3. I've got my 10s on each end because I want the base down to start there for the lip. I'm just going to part that off there and then start hollowing out, or start dealing with the lid. Right, I've just been over this edge of this with a skew chisel just to see how well this comes up, and it's coming up pretty well. My only worry here is, like I say, I've got bits of chip out there, and I have just faced this off a couple of times, so that's something to watch out for. These bits are nice and solid, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to hollow this out now, but I'm only going to probably come to something like about that distance initially, until I then decide partly on the shape. Right, so this hasn't come up too badly at all. It's still a little bit punky, but there's something about oak that gives you that rustic feel, so I'm not too bothered about it. So I've obviously brought the walls a lot thinner than, because I've now got this piece sorted okay. I'm just about to use my new box scraper, and I'm just going to put in about a 10mm lip down there. Like I say, this is going to be the lid. Okay, so this has been sanded to 240. I do have a crack in there as well. Again, I'm not too bothered about it because it is that sort of rustic piece. And this soft bit has also caused a few problems as well, because wherever you sand, it's taking that out a lot further. So I do have a bigger dip on the rim here than the rest of this, but it shouldn't be a problem on the rim itself inside, because at least it should still be a tight fit. The main thing I just have to be careful with is when I sand on the outside, and I've just had to be careful on this bottom base here. So let's see how this comes up nicely. So it looks absolutely lovely. So I'll be back in a minute when I put some wax or something on. Well, I've actually done something different this time. I gave it a couple of coats of wood wax 22 to start with, and I finished off with the Bry Wax dark oak, and I think it's actually come up quite nicely. It's got a nice sort of sheen to it, and because of the colouring in the wax, it's actually penetrated into the grain. Obviously, you can see where the two cracks are in the wood there. And it just gives it that sort of older looking. So next job is to take that off, start on the base, take down the lip on here so that we can obviously turn this around, put it on as a jam chuck. Right, so we've got a nice deep lip there, and that's quite a nice suction fit there. So I'm going to bring the tailstock up after I've just checked the measurements on here, and just shape up the top and the last of the outside here. So the grain still matches up reasonably on this. I mean, it's going to be a little bit out because they're different thicknesses, but I may well just put a couple of burn lines or something around there just to help mask the join a little bit as well, because obviously we've lost 10mm on the grain there from what we've done on the lip. So a little trick I picked up on just recently was, I always found that when you used to bring the live centre up on your piece here, that especially when you got a lid, if you brought it up normally, you'd actually find that the lid would somehow start spinning around off centre. And the trick I found was, in actual fact, put your lathe on, make sure your lid's obviously on securely, put your lathe on a slow speed, then wind your live centre in. It will naturally find the centre point and it holds it a lot better. Might even make a feature of that little piece on the top there as well. So I'm just going to take the rest of this bit down on the end here, and I may well go over this with a skew just to get that better finish. So I decided on a basic shape in the end. Just wasn't overly happy with the top as it was. So I'm just going to sand this up, and I'll come back when I put some sanding seal on it so you can see how the grain goes. So that's been sanded to 240, like the inside. I've got a little bit of a crack there. I did put a little bit of CA on the top of the crack just to keep it in place. So it's come up quite nicely. You've got the odd, I mean this is typical oak, got the odd, very odd little bit of grain, almost a bit like tear out. So just see what this comes up like with some sanding sealer. And what I've done as well, I've just parted off a bit on the bottom just to define the bottom. So I'm going to give that another coat of sanding sealer when it's dried off, and then I'm going to give that a couple of coats of wood wax 22 again, and then buff it up with the bry wax like on the inside, just to see what it comes up like. Well, I think with that bry wax it's come up absolutely lovely. I mean that light patch there has just darkened up so much. And the whole piece just looks like an old piece. So next stage, the lid is now fully finished, and I'm going to hollow out here and finish off the inside. So that's the finished box. I've just basically put it on a jam chuck just to finish the bottom off, and I think the whole thing, even with the cracks and everything, has come up absolutely wonderful. Proportions were still effectively almost thirds, but this time the third is actually the base rather than the lid. So that's the first time I've ever done anything like that, and I've got to say I'm very pleased with it. So I hope you enjoyed watching me make that. I certainly enjoyed it. I mean, I did it over a couple of evenings, just finished it tonight. Absolutely great fun. It really is quite a chunky box, and it has a really nice solid fit. And even with the cracks in there, I just think it looks very rustic and just very old. You could probably just see that somewhere and think, well, that could be 20, 30, 40 years old. And I think that's what's probably appealing with oak, is that oak can look very modern and fresh, but at the same time it really is an old wood, and it comes across naturally on something like that. Obviously the bry wax, given the coloured, a bit of colouring to it as well, has, I think, just made it that much more rustic. I hope you've seen where I've come across about the proportions, the thirds, and things like that, and obviously seen the thought process gone into making this. So please give us some feedback, what you think. It might be something that you've never thought about before. It might be something that you think about every single time that you make a box, that you always naturally go to a third, or you change your mind regularly. So please do give some feedback. So if you're new here, I do regular project videos. This is a sort of like a one-off series on boxes. Please do subscribe. You'll get notified every time I get uploaded a video. For my existing subscribers, again a big thank you as always for keep coming back. I mean, I'm hoping you're finding this series of some use and hopefully enjoying watching the videos. So thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you all on part 2. Thanks a lot, bye.